I documented my wife's mockery and betrayal in silence, then unleashed a calculated evidence trail that ended our marriage and set me free forever. The sound of her laughter hit harder than any slap. It wasn't even loud, just soft, dripping with mockery, cushioned by the hiss of the shower. Glenn stood frozen in the hallway like some pathetic museum exhibit titled, "Husband, 62, realizes he's been a joke," one hand still damp from washing the dinner dishes she hadn't touched, the other clutching the edge of the doorway, knuckles white, eyes locked on the partially open bathroom door. She didn't see him, she never really did these days. But she definitely heard someone. "Don't be mad," she said to the phone. "It's not cheating if you never turn me on anyway." Then laughter. Hers. Then his. Male, muffled through the speaker, but the tone was clear, arrogant, comfortable, like he'd been there before. Glenn blinked, not in disbelief. That would have required surprise, and he was long past that. No, this was the blink of a man who'd mentally rehearsed this moment 100 times but never really thought it would arrive. Like a fire drill that turns into the real thing. No smoke, no flames, just cold air and an annoying sense of finality. He didn't barge in, didn't yell, didn't smash the door open with some righteous fury like the movies told him men do. Instead, he turned slowly, walked to the kitchen, and dried his hands with that stupid towel that said, "Live, laugh, love." Claire had bought it last Christmas after one of her retail therapy binges. He folded the towel, placed it on the counter, and opened the drawer next to the oven. The one she never touched because it held boring stuff, tax receipts, old warranties, expired coupons, and one thing more. An envelope, cream-colored, sealed, no name on it, just waiting. He'd written it last year, the night she came back from yoga smelling like sandalwood and vodka, humming a tune she hadn't heard on the radio since her 20s. That night he'd gone to the guest room and stayed there 3 days. She hadn't noticed until she needed someone to fix the water heater. He walked into their bedroom, their marital bed, now a museum too, with its untouched pillows and her silk robe tossed across his side like a marker for the man who used to exist there. He placed the envelope on her pillow, dead center. Then he opened the bottom drawer of his armoire, one she never had reason to go through, and pulled out a small black key fob. He tapped the button once. A red light blinked on the corner of his nightstand. Finally, he walked out the front door without making a sound, stepped into his truck, and turned the ignition without looking back. She was still laughing in the bathroom, but the punchline had already changed. Claire came out wrapped in a towel that wasn't hers. Glenn had always hated those plush spa-style ones she insisted on buying, said they were too soft to actually dry anything. She bought them anyway, like most things. Like the crystal wine decanter they'd never used, like the gym membership she hadn't touched until she started going with Bryce. The steam rolled behind her like theater fog, and she half-hummed whatever song her little affair buddy had played through the speaker earlier. Her skin glowed, her smile lingered. She was still smiling when she turned the corner into the kitchen, until she realized it was silent. No pan sizzling, no plate set, no Glenn. For half a second, she thought maybe he'd stepped out to grab dessert or wine or one of those bland frozen lasagnas he weirdly liked. But then she saw the envelope on the edge of the kitchen island, not in the mailbox, not tucked somewhere casual front and center. The handwriting wasn't messy. It was surgical, precise. Claire had seen it before, back when Glenn used to handle the family bills in his navy blue ledger before online banking, before he became boring. She opened it with a smirk forming. Maybe he was trying to be dramatic, leave some passive-aggressive message about her forgetting their anniversary again. That would be so Glenn. The note inside was just one line. "Now we're even." She blinked, turned the paper over. Nothing. But below it, folded once, was a second sheet. Her text log, printed, highlighted, annotated like a middle school English assignment. Yellow for every lie, red for every time-stamped hotel mention, blue for the love you messages sent while she was supposedly at the market. There were circles, arrows, a little side note in the margin that read, "Gym with Bryce lasted 17 minutes. Pretty fast cardio, huh?" The smirk evaporated. She dropped the envelope, nearly tripping on the corner of the rug as she bolted toward her phone. The home screen was lit up with missed calls from her sister. She'd ignored them earlier. Claire opened her contacts, tapped Glenn, and hit dial. Straight to voicemail. Again. The third time it didn't even ring. She opened the Find My app. Location not available. A flicker of something new crept up her spine. Not guilt, not sadness. Something colder, something she wasn't used to. Glenn wasn't just gone. Glenn had turned himself off. No social media, no financial pings, nothing on the shared calendar. He wasn't at work. He'd taken time off, she remembered now. She texted, "We need to talk. Where are you?" No response. The quiet around her grew louder. The fridge hummed. The tick of the wall clock. The shower still dripping in the background like a metronome counting down. Claire looked back at the envelope, at her own words printed like evidence, and finally noticed the handwriting on the front, "For when the game stops being fun." Her fingers hovered over her phone again, this time to call her mother, but for some reason she didn't hit dial, not yet. Claire stood in the self-checkout line at Ridgeway Market, cradling overpriced almond milk, 2 bottles of Shiraz, and a bouquet of roses. She wasn't sure who they were for anymore, probably herself. Sympathy roses. She scanned each item with shaky hands, still glancing at her phone every 5 seconds. No reply from Glenn, no read receipts, just silence. Maybe he was playing some kind of weird moral chess game. Give her a scare, make her sweat. She could sweet-talk her way out of that. She always did. Total, $86.12. She pulled out the gold card with the raised initials, Semlari Mercer, and slid it in. Declined. A soft beep. Then nothing. She frowned, took a breath, and did what any suburban narcissist would do. Tried again. Declined. The register asked if she wanted to try another form of payment. The woman behind her was already sighing, clearly regretting this line. Claire's throat tightened. She opened her banking app to transfer funds. Login screen. Weird, it usually stayed logged in. She typed her password. Error. Account access restricted. She tried again. Same thing. She navigated to the forgot password page, tried to reset. This user ID is not associated with an active profile. Now the sighing woman had backed up. Claire grabbed her things and stepped aside, tossing the roses in the trash can next to the exit. In the car, AC blasting despite the chill, she called the bank. The hold music was some instrumental flute loop that made her want to punch a bird. Finally, "Thank you for holding. This is Michelle at First Unified. How can I help you today?" "Yes, this is Claire Mercer. My account's locked. I'm trying to figure out what's going on." Michelle's tone changed with the speed of someone reading a file in real time. "Mrs. Mercer, yes. I see here there was a legal hold initiated by the secondary account holder under an emergency separation clause. Looks like prior authorization was filed in February." "February? What clause? What are you talking about?" Michelle cleared her throat. "It's part of a preemptive asset protection package. The account holder, Mr. Glenn Mercer, triggered the clause. It restricts joint funds during cases of suspected fraud, abuse, or marital instability. I can provide a reference number for your attorney." "I don't have an attorney." "Understood. Unfortunately, due to the clause, your access has been suspended pending resolution or court clarification. I'm sorry." Click. Claire sat in the parking lot, phone slowly lowering from her ear like it weighed 20 pounds. He'd filed in February, back when she thought he was too dumb to notice she never came home with groceries. Back when she was inventing business brunches and burnout weekends with Bryce, he hadn't said a word. Not a raised voice, not a passive jab, not a single warning. He'd been planning, strategizing, quietly mapping her exits, before she even knew she wanted one. And she'd walked straight into the blueprint. She opened her phone again, tried to PayPal herself from their emergency fund. Error. Account suspended. She finally dialed her mother. "Claire, what's wrong? You sound—" "He froze everything," Claire said, voice tight. "The accounts, the apps. He even filed something back in February. He's been planning this." There was a pause, a long one, and her mother said slowly, "Well, I guess he wasn't as dumb as you always said he was." Then the line went dead. Claire's hand shook as she yanked her MacBook from the dining room buffet drawer, the same drawer Glenn used to keep the corkscrew in. She'd always told him it was a clutter magnet. Funny, right now it was the only place that still felt remotely like hers. The screen blinked to life, password field glowing. She typed fast, "No Face ID today, too risky." First stop. Messages. She clicked through every thread with names she'd renamed. Karen Book Club, trainer notes, conference, call. Dozens of them. Some weren't even real names. She opened one, Jill Pilates, only to see photos from that hotel room in Baltimore, her in that cheap lace set she'd told Glenn was a gift for herself. Him, Bryce, half naked, holding a champagne flute like some mid-tier gigolo. Delete, delete, delete. She moved like she was defusing a bomb, racing against a clock no one had set, but that she could feel ticking beneath her skin. Settings, iCloud, unpaired the device, logged out, wiped Safari history, cleared cache, deleted notes, erased voice memos. Then, just to be safe, she opened her hidden album and trashed everything in it. She sat back, chest heaving, feeling a sliver of control again. And then her email pinged. Subject, remote device activity detected, Cinder Mercer Holdings at protonmail.com. She opened it. It wasn't a warning. It was a summary. Remote sync completed. Messages DB. Media. Photos. Voicemails. Memo_2023-10-04_therapy_session.wave. Voice message Claire to mother MP. 3. Chat transcripts. Adapted.html. Backup hash authenticated. File securely stored on external RAID. Redundant copy timestamped. Her vision tunneled. The therapy session. She remembered it too clearly now. That late October night she'd had a glass of wine and, in a burst of irritation, recorded her session with Dr. Morris. She'd vented about Glenn like he was a houseplant that refused to die, called him sexless, dull, a weight, and apparently saved it in a folder she'd forgotten to lock. He hadn't. Claire frantically opened Finder, typed therapy. Nothing, typed Glenn. One result popped up. Merciful Dutch. She clicked. Password prompt. She guessed 3 times. All wrong. Another ping, new email, no subject, no text, just an attachment. She opened it, a zip file labeled Claire Evidence Package 1. Inside, screenshots of her text to Bryce, annotated. Her call log with Bryce's contact labeled Emergency Vet. Her voicemails transcribed. One of them, just keep quiet about Saturday. Glenn's too dumb to connect anything unless it's laminated and color-coded. And it was. Every file sorted into folders, labeled, documented, timestamped. One folder, legal use only. Another, Claire's lies, cross-referenced. She slammed the laptop shut like closing it would undo what was already beyond control. Her mouth was dry, her head pounding. It wasn't damage control anymore, it was containment. And Glenn hadn't just seen the fire. He'd built a sprinkler system around it while she danced with matches. Claire had never been the kind of woman who made friends easily. She collected them, curated them really, like seasonal handbags, one for wine nights, one for sympathy brunches, a few for passive-aggressive yoga sessions where gossip substituted for stretching. They weren't soulmates, but they served their purpose. They validated her choices, they laughed at her jokes, and most importantly, they all agreed Glenn was sweet but forgettable. Now none of them were picking up. She tried Melissa first. Melissa had been her go-to for years, a divorcee who once got half a lake house and a BMW just by crying during mediation. Claire figured she'd understand. No answer. Tried again. Voicemail. Hey Mel, it's Claire. I need to talk. Something's going on with Glenn. Call me. Then Lindsay, the one who called Glenn the stable one while pouring vodka into her green juice. Straight to voicemail. Tomorrow blocked. She didn't even know that was a thing real people did. She sat on the couch, feet tucked under her like a teenager who didn't know where to go when prom got canceled. She scrolled through her contacts, hesitating. Her finger hovered over Sarah K. Temple. Sarah was the last person she wanted to call. Too judgmental, too grateful for the little things, always posting photos of her dog and that bald husband with captions like still choosing each other. Gross. But Claire tapped call anyway. A long ring. Then, Claire. The voice wasn't warm. It was clinical. Oh my God. Finally. Everyone's ghosting me. I don't know what the hell Glenn is doing. He's pulling all this crazy stuff with the bank and... Sarah cut her off. He sent us the screenshots. Claire went silent. Sarah continued, voice tight like she didn't even want to be having this conversation. The one where you called him dead wood in a cashmere sweater. The one where you laughed about cheating after he paid off your sister's hospital bill. Claire's mouth opened, then closed. I didn't know he didn't have to say anything, Claire. You made a group chat about humiliating him. You said he cried at night over the dog dying and you mocked him for it. You joked he probably cried harder for the dog than for you. Sarah paused. The line was deadly quiet now. You're not the victim here. Claire whispered, you don't understand what our marriage was like. Maybe not, Sarah said, but I do understand who paid for my husband's car to get repaired after he lost work. It wasn't you. Click. Claire sat motionless, phone still pressed to her cheek like the call was ongoing. She stared at the coffee table, at the bottle of Shiraz she never opened, at the half-burnt lavender candle she used to light during FaceTime calls with Bryce. Her network wasn't just gone, it had flipped. These women weren't friends anymore. They were witnesses, and she was the punchline in a joke no one was laughing at anymore. Claire stood on the front steps of the Lakeview condo, blinking in the afternoon glare like someone waking from a long, nauseating dream. Same building, same landscaping, same decorative stone planter she tripped over last summer while tipsy off sangria. It was all exactly as she remembered it, except the keypad was blinking red. Denied. She typed it again, slower this time, the same 4-digit code she'd chosen years ago, 1031 Halloween. Because nothing was scarier than a joint mortgage. She used to laugh about that. Access denied. Claire scowled, pressed the intercom. It crackled but didn't connect. She knocked, then banged. And that's when she saw them through the wide glass front door. 2 people she didn't recognize. A young couple, maybe mid-30s. She in yoga pants, him holding a box labeled books, his. They looked at her like she was a confused delivery driver. The woman smiled politely but didn't move. The man just tilted his head, confused. Claire knocked harder. "This is my home. Open the door." They didn't. The woman hesitated, then reached for a remote on the table and pressed something. The electronic blinds slowly began to descend. Claire stood there, palms still pressed to the glass as her own life got shuttered in front of her. She yanked out her phone, dialed building management, Silverwood Leasing. "This is Trina. How can I help?" "Yes. Hi, there's been a mistake. My code isn't working. I'm at 6F, the Lakeview condo, and there are strangers inside my home." A pause, then some clicking. "Name?" "Claire Mercer." More typing. Then the voice returned, chipper but ice cold. "Oh, Mrs. Mercer. The lease for Unit 6F was terminated last week by the majority title holder." Claire blinked. "What majority holder?" "Mr. Glenn Mercer. Paperwork was processed 3 days ago. He had exclusive sale rights on the unit and opted for a private sublease agreement. The new tenants are protected under a 12-month contract." "That's not possible," Claire said, voice rising. "My name is on everything." "No, ma'am. It isn't. The original co-tenancy ended under an asset protection restructure Glenn submitted via Clause 8A in the deed. He retained 70% interest due to premarital investment. You were listed as co-resident, not co-owner." Her knees wobbled. She grabbed the steel railing to steady herself. "Where's my stuff?" she croaked. The voice on the phone shifted, slightly softer now. "Your personal belongings were boxed and sent to the shipping address on file. I believe it was a storage unit in Dunham." "No one told me. We sent 2 certified letters. Both signed for..." Claire didn't remember signing anything. Then again, she didn't remember a lot of things lately. The line disconnected. She turned and looked around. No one was watching. No one noticed. A few kids played with scooters on the sidewalk. A dog barked in the distance. The world had the audacity to keep spinning while she stood there in last season's boots, holding a knockoff Chanel bag full of expired lipsticks and receipts from a life that had already ended. She screamed, not words, not a name, just raw, helpless noise. A neighbor across the street glanced over, then walked back inside. Claire stood in the middle of the sidewalk, surrounded by a neighborhood that no longer had a place for her, not even a doormat. Claire walked into the conference room at Mallister and Rowan, in heels that pinched. She hadn't worn them in over a year, but she needed height, something, anything, to make her feel grounded again. The paralegal led her in without small talk, just a nod toward the long walnut table. Glenn was already there, alone. No lawyer, no assistant, no moral support, just him. A man who'd once cried at that damn Subaru commercial and spent 2 years building their front porch himself. Now he sat with a single manila folder in front of him, perfectly centered, as if even chaos had to be symmetrical in his world. He didn't stand when she entered, just looked up, no hate in his eyes, no anger. That almost made it worse. "Claire," he said simply. She sat down slowly across from him, waiting for a barrage, a lecture, a rant. But Glenn just opened the folder and slid a stack of papers toward her. On top, a printed timeline. "Go ahead," he said, voice calm. "That's the breakdown, month by month. Of when you stopped seeing me as a man and I started seeing you as a liability. She stared at him, lips parting. Excuse me? But he didn't repeat himself. Her eyes dropped to the timeline. June 2022. Cancelled anniversary dinner. Not feeling well. GPS later showed Claire's phone pinged at a rooftop bar. August 2022. Glenn's cancer scare. Claire's calendar note. Don't forget Sympathy Act. November 2022. Glenn pays off Claire's sister's $9,200 hospital bill. Claire texts Bryce. Now he really thinks he's a hero. LOL. February 2023. Claire initiates secret transfer of $14,300 to private investment account under the name Bryce Dunn LLC. April 2023. Claire records therapy session. Complains Glenn is like a walking beige cardigan. Each entry had receipts, screenshots, notations, even call logs cross-referenced with her supposed yoga class attendance. She looked up, jaw clenched. You stalked me. Glenn leaned back, folding his hands over his stomach like he was settling in for a weather report. No, I documented you. Stalking is for people who still hope to be loved. I was just making sure the math added up. Claire flipped to the next section. Statements from Dr. Morris, her therapist. Notes Glenn had legally requested via subpoena once the therapy session file appeared in his possession. Her own words quoted verbatim. He's so small. Not physically, just as a presence. He's not a husband. He's a tax deduction in khakis. I said those things in private, she snapped. And you recorded them illegally, then saved them under my vents. I didn't breach your privacy, Claire. You breached your own. The next page showed a financial heat map of transfers. Her Amazon splurges, Bryce's Zelle requests. A spike in withdrawals every time Glenn had a medical procedure. I covered everything, Glenn said, while you were building a parallel life on my dime. I just itemized it like an accountant. Claire's hands trembled as she flipped to the last sheet. It was titled Restitution Proposal. He was offering her a settlement, generous even, but with terms. No claim to his pension, no access to the property he'd inherited from his father, a gag clause prohibiting her from speaking about their marriage publicly, in writing, or via social media. Bryce's legal name included in a formal, no-contact order. She swallowed hard. This is revenge. Glenn gave the softest smile she'd ever seen on him, almost sympathetic. No, Claire. This is me paying the bill for your freedom. Then he stood, placed his pen neatly beside the folder, and walked toward the door. He paused once, hand on the knob. You used to say I was boring, unimaginative, that I'd never surprise you. He turned his head slightly, just enough for her to catch his eye. Well, he said, surprise. And then he was gone. Claire didn't want to be there the second time. The conference room felt colder, even though nothing had changed. Same minimalist decor, same sterile carafe of untouched water, same damn ticking wall clock Glenn had once complimented for its reliable rhythm. But this time Glenn wasn't alone. A woman in a slate gray suit sat beside him, his attorney clearly young, sharp, with a coiled braid, and eyes that read people like resumes. Across from them, Claire sat alone. Her own lawyer had been a no-show, claimed a scheduling conflict. Truth was, Claire had maxed out what little trust she had left with everyone, including professionals. The monitor on the far wall blinked to life. We've prepared a visual summary, the attorney said flatly. Claire opened her mouth to object. A visual summary? What the hell does that even mean? But the screen was already rolling. First clip, grainy hallway camera outside a hotel room. There she was, red trench coat, laughing. Bryce's hand on her lower back. They disappeared into room 416. Clip 2, same hotel, different night, different dress, same man. Clip 3, audio overlay. Her voice, confident, cutting. He's like a faded painting, no color left. I feel like a widow married to a wax figure. Clip 4, Bryce on a restaurant patio feeding her a bite of his steak. She giggled, wiped his lip, said, if Glenn ever knew, he'd probably offer to drive us home and thank us for being honest. Glenn didn't react, not a blink. He sat with his fingers tented under his chin, calm as a monk. Claire, meanwhile, was unraveling. All right, enough, she said, rising halfway. We've established I made mistakes. I was lonely. The lawyer lifted a finger. One more clip. The screen switched to a living room. Claire's mother was there, Mrs. Callahan, wearing that oversized cashmere sweater she always claimed was heirloom Scottish. Claire sat beside her, wine glass in hand, "So, how's Glenn doing?" her mother asked, eyes half rolling. Claire snorted on the recording. "Oh, he had a cancer scare or something. Probably just acid reflux, but you should have seen the drama. Did he cry?" Claire laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. I had to bite my cheek not to burst out laughing. Silence. Glenn still didn't move. "That wasn't," Claire started. "That was private." His attorney replied, "Your mother had the same smart TV as your condo. Glenn managed the installation. You forgot." Claire's knees buckled, but she stayed upright, barely. The last frame froze, her face mid-laugh, her mother's face smug, subtitle lingering. I had to bite my cheek not to burst out laughing. Then the screen went black. Claire sat slowly, hands trembling so badly the water glass rattled. She reached for it, missed. Glenn finally spoke, quietly, measured. "I told you once that I was scared to die alone." She looked up at him. "I was already dead," he said. "You made sure I didn't fear that anymore, because it turns out I already was." He rose without waiting for a response. The attorney gathered the folder. Claire sat there sobbing, the sound muffled by her own hand over her mouth. No one offered a tissue. No one said a word. The envelope was thick, not dramatically so. Glenn was never theatrical, but weighty in the way that matters. Claire sat across from him again. Same conference room, now feeling like a confession booth that served coffee. This time the screen stayed off. No footage, no evidence. Just 2 pens, 1 document, and the ghost of everything she used to control sitting smugly in a chair, wearing faded flannel and absolute power. He pushed the envelope toward her gently, as if offering tea. "Final version," he said, reviewed, notarized. "It's clean, generous, but conditional." She opened it with the hands of someone defusing a landmine. First page, settlement terms. She keeps the Audi. She keeps the jewelry he'd given her over the years, excluding the vintage ring from his grandmother. She keeps the rental property in Traverse City, but Glenn retains the primary condo and all ownership of the duplex in Charleston. Monthly stipend for 1 year, one-time tax-free payout. 6 figures, comfortable, not luxurious. But the bolded line beneath caught her eye. In exchange, Claire Mercer agrees to forfeit all claims to Mr. Mercer's pension, retirement accounts, and shares in Mercer Tools and Ironworks LLC. Claire's eyes narrowed. "That company was built during our marriage." "Yes," Glenn nodded. "And you called it adorable when I worked on it every Saturday while you were wine tasting with clients. You also said, quote, 'I'd rather eat drywall than hear about torque wrenches ever again.'" She stayed quiet. He continued, tone steady. "That company paid your sister's bills, your retreats, your so-called marketing seminars. You once flew to Palm Springs for branding inspiration and came back with a sunburn and a lower back tattoo you still pretend was henna." Claire opened her mouth, closed it again. "It paid," Glenn said softly, "for your other life." She flipped further. "Another condition, non-disparagement clause. Both parties agree not to speak publicly or privately in a defamatory or negative manner regarding one another, including on social media, podcasts, written memoirs, therapy forums, or future romantic partners." "You're muzzling me," she whispered. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "You were willing to burn it all for a laugh, Claire. A punchline. I'm not punishing you. I'm capping the damage. You walk with a fraction, and your silence." Her face flushed. "You don't want justice. You want control." "I wanted dignity," Glenn said. "You voted against that repeatedly." He slid the pen toward her. She didn't touch it. "You always said I was passive," he added. "That I just absorbed whatever storm you brought home. You called me a sponge once, remember?" Claire's throat closed. "Well," Glenn said, standing, "sponges eventually reach capacity. Then they drip." He walked to the window, hands in his pockets, looked out at the city like it owed him nothing. She signed, shaking, 1 letter at a time, because the room wasn't just silent, it was sealed. The room was still, the kind of still you earn. Glenn stirred at 6:12 a.m., not because of an alarm, but because his body had relearned peace. No weight in his chest, no tension in his jaw. The air smelled like pine and lemon oil. His new cabin sat just outside Braddock Lake, where cell reception came and went like migrating birds. He rolled over and tapped his phone awake. 324 missed calls. He didn't flinch. A few voicemails. Texts stacked like a digital avalanche. "Please, we need to talk. I made a mistake." "Why are you doing this?" You said you'd never abandon me. Then the strange ones. The bargaining ones. Just tell me what to say in court. I'll do anything. He didn't mean anything to me, Glenn. It was just noise. Noise. Glenn exhaled slowly, like a man tasting air after surfacing too long underwater. He scrolled, barely reading. Her words weren't even painful anymore. They were echoes, the voice of someone who once sat across the breakfast table critiquing his toast spread, now begging for scraps of forgiveness she never learned how to give. He opened the message app, typed slowly. No drama, no monologue, just the truth. I gave you everything. You gave me a punchline. He didn't wait for a reply. He tapped the top of the screen, info, scrolled, block this caller, delete contact, confirm, gone. Claire Mercer no longer existed in his digital world, and soon not in any other. Glenn set the phone down and walked outside to the deck. The morning fog was lifting off the lake like smoke from an old life. Ducks floated past, unbothered. Inside, a fresh pot of coffee bubbled. He didn't smile, didn't raise a glass, didn't give the movie ending. He just sat down quietly, took a sip, and let the silence stay uninterrupted. Because this silence wasn't empty, it was full.